All right, we're back. Worth your salt. Chapter 14. Not too much. Here we go. It was a normal day, at the normal time, in the normal way that I parked my car beside Furman's in the truck stop parking lot. But what was not normal was all the other cars. It appeared all the waitresses and busboys had already arrived, which was highly unusual. Furman and I were always the first to arrive by at least half an hour. When I walked up to the front door, I looked up and noticed the United States flag I had replaced with the new one was flying at half staff. And when I looked at the front doors, I noticed there was a wreath on the door leading into the truck stop. Something important died? As soon as I walked inside, I felt the misery within. I wanted to ask the dreaded question of who died, but I couldn't seem to find my tongue, and nobody was running to tell me. I did notice, however, that everyone was huddling around Miss Fine, who appeared to be just short of hysteria. Apparently, someone in her family had died. And since someone in her family had died, it had now become someone in our family. But one thing bothered me. If someone in Miss Fine's family had died, why was she at work? That is when I realized the Grim Reaper had likely taken one of us from our restaurant. Frantically, I took a quick survey and saw all the waitresses, including the night and evening shifts. All were present. All the busboys on our shift were here, although none of them had their hats on, but I didn't see any of the others. The owner was present, along with his wife, who was over holding Miss Fine's hand. It was kind of unnerving the way some of the waitresses were looking at me. They would see me and then avert their teary eyes. It was like they were trying to avoid me altogether. I could not imagine what I might have done. I liked all the waitresses, and I thought they all liked me. Finally, I headed to the kitchen. Furman would tell me what was going on and who had died. I only hoped it was someone I didn't know well. Death is harder on a person when they know the deceased intimately. Just before I went into the kitchen, the busboy on the night shift patted me on the shoulder and said, "I'm sorry, man." I almost stopped to ask him what he meant, but I was halfway through the swinging doors when he touched my shoulder, so I kept on walking. The peculiar thing was Furman was not at his grill. Neither was he over by the ovens or over by his kneading table. He did not appear to be in the kitchen at all. In fact, the kitchen seemed cold. It was normally quite hot, but not today. So I looked and saw the ovens were all off, so were the grills. Nothing except the refrigerator and the freezers were going. This could only mean our restaurant was closed, which meant somebody very important had died. President, vice president, statesman, maybe a general? I had not listened to the news on the radio or watched any television, so I had no idea who it could be. But where was Furman? It was unlike him to not be in his kitchen. And being the commanding leader he was, he'd most certainly be here at a tragic time like this. He would be comforting the waitresses in their grief, most especially Miss Fine, whom he had honored so wonderfully several weeks ago. He would be telling the busboys to square their shoulders back and be strong and not to cry, to be an example of strength to the ladies. And he would be checking to see if I had shaven close and my gig line was straight. Then he would cut his eyes to my boots to see if he could see his image reflected in them. But I could not find him. Finally, I did the only thing left for me to do. "Furman? Furman, where are you?" I called out loudly. It got very quiet in the restaurant. All talk ceased, and all the busboys were looking at me. But why? Why are they looking at me? I went back into the storeroom and flung open the door. "Furman?" I called out, but he wasn't in there. So I walked to the back door and walked out on the concrete loading dock, but he wasn't out there either. Where could he be? "Furman," I yelled out, thinking that was maybe somewhere out of my line of sight, and that if he heard me, he would walk into view where I could see him. "Furman, Furman," I continually called out, but he was not coming into view. I walked around the outside of the restaurant, looked out and saw Furman's car beside mine in the parking lot. "I know he's here. There's his car." So I stood there in the slightly foggy parking lot and tried to think of where Furman could have gone. It dawned on me. He had gone to the store. Obviously, he needed something we had run out of, and he had asked someone to drive him to the store so he could get something. Yeah, that's it. He's gone to the store. Reassured, I walked back into the restaurant by the front door again, but this time every eye was trained on me. It made the hair stand up on the back of my neck. It was like they were trying to tell me something without saying the words. I was supposed to read the message they were relaying with their eyes. But all I could see was sadness and heartbreak. The eerie thing was, it seemed to be directed at me. But I wasn't dead. I was very much alive. So why were they looking at me as if I was dead? Slowly, she rose from her chair. Her hand came up holding a tissue. She dabbed at her eyes. She started walking towards me. My heart started beating rapidly in my chest. My breath was coming in gasps. I felt like something terrible was about to happen. There was not a thing I could do about it. Miss Fine stopped a foot in front of me. Her hands came out and caressed my face. She said, "He loved you most of all." He loved you most of all? Who? I wondered. Who is she talking about? What are you talking about, Miss Fine? I asked honestly. When she heard my question, I saw the terrible sadness return on her face. Tears erupted from both my eyes, and she grabbed me in her embrace and squeezed me fiercely. Suddenly, I knew. The fierceness of her grasp told me everything. Furman. It was Furman who had died. I tried to grasp the reality of it, but I couldn't do it. I just saw him last night. We sat down together at the booth over by the window. He said he wanted to talk to me. He told me how proud he was of me. He told me I was like a son to him. He told me he'd been looking all his life for someone he could train to be like he was, for someone who would stand tall in the middle of a crisis and always do the right thing. And he said I had done that when I took it upon myself to go to the bank and try to save the restaurant. Of course, I told him the others had had the same idea, and they showed up right after I did. But he said they only did it because they knew I would. They followed me. Then he told me something that will stay in my thoughts forever. He said I mirrored his greatest trait, a trait taught to him by a very special lady, a lady I had met. He said, "You are passion in action, mi amigo," my friend. Abruptly, I broke. I pulled myself from Miss Fine's embrace and yelled out, "No, he can't be dead, not Furman. I'm not ready for him to die. He has to keep teaching me, don't you see?" I asked Miss Fine, who was sobbing into her tissue now. "I'm not ready to be without him. I still need him. He is teaching me to be great, to be better than I ever been before. I need him still," I told the bus boys, who nodded their heads while tears ran down their cheeks. I ceased moving. My body became immobile. Someone was holding me with an iron embrace. I saw the tissue in her hand and knew Miss Fine had come up from behind me and grabbed me tighter than I thought she could. Her face was in my neck and she whispered, "John, please stop. Furman might be watching you." And I did stop. Now dry up your tears. Be the man he knows you are. Lead us. Now that we do not have Furman, we need you. At once, I could see him in my mind's eye looking at me. I saw him pull his shoulders back and raise his face up. So I